155 males last year, 116 juveniles, and 152 females, 322 total. So the total of them is about half.
Pete, how are you? You know Corey Rice?
Yeah, I met him.
Good to see you, sir.
So we know we're still waiting on a few more people. I know Chairman Tankard is on his way, but there's a few accidents in the tunnel, so it's for when he gets here. That's anybody's guess. But we do have a quorum, and Chris Moore said he'd be able to serve as vice chair for time until Ed does get here, so we can get through some of the procedural things. So we can start with introductions. We do have 2 new committee members. Well, we have 3, one of whom looks like isn't here, but if Mr. Headley and Mr. Rice want to introduce yourselves.
Spencer Headley, Reedville, Virginia.
Corey Rice, Reedville, Virginia.
J.C. Hutchins Matthews.
Chris Moore, Virginia Beach.
Wayne Morris, Northern Neck, Warsaw, Virginia.
Tom Powers, I live in Missouri.
Mark Sanford, Virginia Beach.
Pete.
Pete, you want to introduce, do introductions?
What's that?
We're doing introductions real quick for the new folks.
I can't hear you.
Introductions. Do you want to introduce yourself for the new folks?
Introduce myself?
Yes.
I'm Peter Nixon. I can't hear anything. The older I get, the worse it gets. I lost my hearing in my left ear a while back, but I got it under control. I changed my pronouns to huh and what.
Marshall Cox Senior, Eastern Shore.
Thank you, everyone. So next item will be approval of minutes from the March 27th, 2024 work session meeting. Did everyone have a chance to review those?
Don't have any. Thank you.
I tell you what, you want to give folks time, we'll come back to those maybe. Give folks
Okay.
time to look at them, we can come back.
Well, it's gonna be some time then, because after that, we're gonna head into the survey results.
Okay, that's fine.
So you all should have gotten in your email the Virginia's press release on the 2024 winter dredge survey results. So here's a quick roundup. Most abundance estimates did decrease from 2023, but on the whole, we're considering the population pretty stable. The total crab abundance decreased 2% to 317 million. The total abundance ranks 23rd out of the 35 years of the survey. Adult female abundance decreased 14% to 133 million crabs, but that's still above the abundance threshold of 72 million crabs, below which they'd be considered overfished. And they are still, however, below the abundance target of 196 million crabs. Adult male abundance also decreased 19% to 46 million, but the decrease in the adult population was kind of offset by an increase in the juvenile abundance, 16% to 138 million. I'll give you a minute to get settled. So we've got our total abundance of crabs of all ages and sexes was 317 million. This is below average. Average for the whole time period has been about 407 million crabs. The adults, that's ages 1 and up abundance, just about at average. So adult abundance was 179 million, long-term average was 182, so pretty much at it. Adult abundance by sex, you've got female abundance, adult female abundance on the pink line. See it decreased a little bit, but it's still kind of in that the upper range of their history there. And then male abundance decreased a little bit, but the adult males have really been bouncing around that range all along the way. As I said, adult female abundance was 133 million, below the target of 196 million, but above the threshold below which they'd be considered depleted, which would be 72 million crabs. And then juvenile abundance, you can see we've been continuing a little upward trajectory from 2021 up to 138 million, which is still below the average of 207. Now, we don't manage to juveniles, but they make a pretty good indicator. You can see generally when juveniles increased, harvest increased, juveniles decreased, harvest decreased. So, like I said, we've been in that stretch of increasing juvenile abundance, so I think we're likely to see an increase in harvest, but we'll see what shakes out this time next year. So now we'll get into the bay-wide harvest data and reference points. And just a reminder, this does not include any of the seaside areas. This is only harvest from within the bay. So bay-wide commercial harvest, this is the harvest by jurisdictions, Virginia, Potomac River, and Maryland. Harvest increased 9%, mostly driven by a 15% increase in Virginia's harvest, up to 45.7 million. That's pounds. Female harvest especially increased in Virginia, decreased a little bit in Maryland. The bars tell you how many pounds of females were harvested, and the lines are what percentage of females harvested came from Virginia and Maryland. So Virginia did catch a larger percentage of crabs this year than we did last year. Male harvest pretty much stays the same between the two jurisdictions. Not a surprise given their distribution. The female exploitation rate decreased from, I think, 31% down to 25%. So not only are we below the overfishing threshold of 37%, we're also a little bit below the target, which is where we like to be, because that 25% doesn't include any underreporting, and also has a kind of bare guess for recreational harvest. Male exploitation rate, the conservation trigger, which is the second highest harvest of males in this history, so it's not a biological reference point like we use for the females, that's at 34%. So if we remove 34% of males that are present in the bay at the time of the preceding survey, last year's exploitation rate was 33.9%. So just snuck in under there. And the conservation trigger is just an advisory to the jurisdictions, hey, something might be changing in kind of dynamics, something to look at. It's not a demand for action. So I can take any questions. Of course, we do have Ram and Mike Stebo here from VIMS to answer any questions about the survey results.
Alex, I got one question on the, do you have some numbers on the amount of harvesters that we had for this year and how many licenses we're selling?
In Virginia.
Yeah, in
That's
Virginia, yeah.
that's the section I'm going to get to next.
Okay, all right, good.
Can you go back to one of your averages, the second of the average, bar charts with an average?
For what part of the population?
So, when you're talking about abundance, and you say the average, this is a long-term average, which I'm concerned that using this average as a metric, when you start driving the population down, the average starts going down, so you say, well, it's getting better, it's not as bad as it was last year or whatever, but the overall population is still down versus the average or where we would like the average to be, or where the average should be, which one would hope would be like 230, 250 million, rather than, below 200.
Well, the tricky part there is we would have to identify a reference period.
Yes.
And now if there was something the committee wanted to see, we could absolutely present that in the
But
future.
a reference period shouldn't include the years that were so bad that we had to have all these draconian emergency measures to try to recover the fishery.
Well, I'll tell you, the average since 2009 was 202 million. So compared to, that's the 179 up there.
Yeah, well, so this average is skewed by like 4 years, 5 years. It's just a concern of the way we look at data.
Mhm.
So that's, we dealt with that, and that's a good point. I think in the female, don't we have the average since 2009?
So it was,
At least in
for the 1+ of both sexes was 202 million.
No, so I'm thinking
I just
the-
have that in my notes here.
Yeah, I was thinking about the H1 female, H1 plus. Okay, we haven't had, so in the SNAP
Average-
assessment in the report, you'll see that we use different averages. We use the one since 2008 as the best, I think, more accurate estimate of the average. And this year, it was, I think, just below last year.
So this year, adult female abundance was 133 million. The long-term average was 117. The average since 2009 was 146. So we're above the long-term average, but below the average since 2009.
But that long-term average includes 1, 2, 3 years that we were depleted,
Mhm.
several years that we were very close to depleted. And that's the concern, that you're using an average that's got terrible numbers in it, and we're looking at that and saying, oh, we're doing good, and my answer is, no,
The
we're
real
not.
references that we use are the reference points.
Yeah.
So the reference points are for female abundance and for exploitation rate. And that's what really the final say comes from those. And that's why we're between the target threshold or near the target.
When I've made a note in the future, I will make sure to include both of those averages. All right, any other questions on survey results or Baywide harvest before I get into Virginia harvest?
Last year, we went through a discussion about surveying up in the tributaries a little further. Do you still have on hand for this meeting a picture with all the dots where the sites are, where most of the survey occurred? No?
I don't have that. Hmm?
I know
Oh,
we questioned Ron about it, and he was talking at the time about you'd have to have some shallow water equipment.
Well, so we go way
Is this
up
the
trip.
picture you meant?
In fact, Mike, how far up do we go? We go almost to West Point, right?
is that the picture you meant?
25 on all the trip.
How far are you going to James River?
Go to the big bend there at Jamestown. Just past the syrup.
The issue with the shallow water is that we can't go into waters.
Yeah, well, I'm not really looking to see how shallow water you go into, but just how far you go up some, even the middle of the tributaries. I've never really had, I mean, I'm sitting here trying to look at this now. You know, the James River's a long ways, with plenty of deep water, they run ships all the way to Richmond. But I just didn't know how far you were able to go up there. And what I'm trying to get at is, with this species we have, these blue catfish, I'm trying to figure out, of course, you know, who knows, because you haven't done it before. If there's a point where you reach where you don't see anything, you know, in the winter, the further up you go. You know, we see a certain migration of crabs down the bay to try to reach high salinity, and we know a certain number of them stay, and they're gonna shed multiple more times.
So,
But,
In the early years of the dredge, we went to mile 30, which was up to the Chickahominy, maybe just a little bit past that.
in
And
James,
Maryland decided that there were just not very many results from going that far up. We were getting lots of zeros.
I got you.
So they changed it to 25 miles up each trip. So that put it right there around, just before you get to the ferry at Jamestown.
Right.
Mike, where does that put you in the York and the Rappahannock then too?
Yorktown, or York River, is pretty much West Point, and the Rappahannock, about the power line there at Rappahannock.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have any data on those areas in particular, or does it just get run in with everything else? To see if there's been any depletion in the last decade or so.
I mean, every catfish you.
So what we have been doing is working with the trawl survey too. They go up a little higher than we do. And they've estimated, or at least Mayor Fabrizio's group has estimated the consumption rate by blue catfish. So the next step that we're talking about doing is to try to relate what we get, the total abundance we get from the survey, use their estimates of the consumption rate to see how much we think it's taken away, but we don't have any final numbers. I mean, it's a good point. We'll take a look at that. We'll try to see if, we've been talking about doing some spatial analyses, and I think that would be right up our alley to do that. Gabby Saluda is over there. She's sort of our expert. She's done some of that before, so we'll take a look at that. That's a good idea.
A general comment, I don't think we really want to know the answer, because the only thing we can do is reduce harvest. Everybody's doing everything they can to get rid of to kill as many blue catfish as they can.
Need more catfish.
I know. Catch them, kill them, eat them.
Well, excuse me, Tom, that's my concern. You know, you've been on here quite a while, and we've done everything over over almost 4 decades since I've been fooling with this, that you can think of to adjust harvest to compensate for is there or isn't there or whatever. For what? You know, are we,
Feeding the fish.
tilting at windmills with all our harvest restrictions and stuff, if we've got a predator out there that's gonna eat us out of house and home no matter what we do?
And they come further and further down the river.
I mean, I don't know, it's just, I just see too much harvest adjustment for no results.
And that's what I'm saying. I mean, if we have more predation, a higher predation because of the blue catfish, and the only thing that BMRC can do, other than try to figure out a way to let everybody electrofish, is reduce the crab harvest to manage the crab fishery.
Well, Virginia's been doing a lot of work towards increasing marketing for blue
Yeah.
catfish,
So that-
increasing infrastructure for processing, trying to get Virginia into new markets that will open up more opportunities for harvest. And with the upcoming stock assessment, I know they're looking at blue catfish data to see if this is something that can be used in the assessment.
Alexa, can you go back to the Maryland versus Virginia harvest just real quick?
Female or male, or total?
Male. Because I know the last couple of years I'm sorry, go back to female. Last year was kind of an anomaly, I guess, where we were almost 50-50, but this year we're back to what's been closer to the historical pattern on female harvest between the two states, it looks like. Is that generally right?
I mean, I don't know offhand the difference between 2011 to 2017 and 2018 to 2023, why the patterns have changed so much. So this year isn't out of place with the pattern since 2018, but when you compare it to 2011 to 2017,
Yeah.
Makes my head hurt.
Alright, so we move on to Virginia's commercial harvest data. So last year, you harvested 18,557,000 pounds, 13% increase over 2022. As usual, hard crab pots, about 97% of that. Peeler pots, 2.6, so somewhere around 3 has been the normal. And then other gears at 0.1%. Now, while harvest increased 13%, dockside value increased 31%, up to 41 million, and that is a comparison of prices adjusted to 2023 dollars. So, I know we're in a lot of inflation right now, but that is, we do adjust all of our historical values to inflation. We had 772 harvesters, which I believe was a decrease. I don't have how much. And a little.
Increase, 738 last year.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And then a 5% increase in trips.
Excuse me. You say 738, I asked that question last year, same question.
Yeah,
So-
that's what I had on.
So we
on last year.
had more harvesters this year than we had last year,
Yeah.
plus we had an increase in the catch, is that correct?
Mhm.
Looks like
No.
it. I don't think I have number of harvesters in here, other than, I don't have a history of number of harvesters.
That's important, if you have more people harvesting
Mhm.
than you did the previous year, chances are your catch is gonna increase.
I don't have the summary I sent you. Okay.
Alexa, I think it's been staying 700-800 for the last
Yeah.
6 to 8 years, maybe something like that. It's been pretty consistent.
So I have crab pot, which does show a decrease in number of people active. And now the numbers I present to you for each preceding year, those are preliminary. We do get, not a lot of late reports, but we do get some late reports, and this is for hard crab pots only.
How many of the harvesters are agents?
No more than
120.
125.
25 people.
But even then, we issue 125 permits, and there's usually not that many active. Usually if you get the permit or are made eligible for the permit and never pick it up and never report harvest. All right, so harvest, yeah, you do see an increase over the last 2 years, but still below the average since 1994 and the average since 2009. So here's that harvest compared to the dockside value, again, adjusted to the consumer price index. So were you all getting higher prices last year than year before?
Never tell.
I mean, they bought it this year, and
So far this year is better than last year.
and bought it consistently through spring, yeah.
Okay. effort, we did have that increase about 2,000 trips for the year.
What was that, about the effort? That was more?
Increased by about 2,000 trips from 46 to 48,000.
How many people worked in December, the extension of the season? Do you know that number?
I don't have number of people, but I can show you harvest.
All right, good.
It's in December.
Shit.
So, over the course of the year, the months were, except for March, generally below average. But they followed the same typical pattern of peak in April, and then gradual increase back up to a late summer peak. December, harvest is usually low, but we know people do get better value, better prices for the crabs they're catching then. And then crab pot licensing, you've already seen. Number active decreased, number of sold decreased as well. And, well, let me stop and take any questions on Virginia's harvest.
I have one question. The seaside crab, you said it's not included in the Baywide harvest, correct?
It is included in this section of the slide. So when I'm presenting Virginia, that's all Virginia.
Right.
Everything landed in Virginia.
So maybe I should ask the question earlier. Do you know why it's not included in the Baywide harvest if they're under the same management program as the Bay?
But just the numbers we always use, because the Bay survey is in the Bay, we don't want to compare number of crabs present in the Bay to number taken from outside as well.
Right, I was just referencing back that we were told that the seaside crabs are involved because the eggs go into the ocean and swirl around and go into the seaside. So technically, it would fall under that management process. That's the reason why I asked the question, why wouldn't include it? Because technically, as we were told,
They're involved in the processes, but if, for example, we're doing the exploitation rate and we're comparing number of crabs harvested to number of crabs present, if we don't have a number of crabs present on the seaside, we shouldn't include number of crabs harvested on the seaside, or that would kind of throw it out of the reference point.
in your position, do you think it's fair to manage the same crab population on the seaside with the same management as the Bay?
Like I said, they are involved in the processes. We don't have the numbers, well, the abundance numbers for the seaside, unfortunately, but they are part of the population.
I think the question, the more fair question is, if we're going to do cuts because of exploitation rate, and the exploitation rate is strictly in the Bay, we have no clue as to what the exploitation rate is in the seaside, that I would find is a questionable.
What does that one talk about?
Now, if we're taking cuts because of overall abundance and not exploitation rate, that's a whole nother matter.
But if the overall abundance isn't known on the seaside of the Eastern Shore, should there a cut be made? Bill Crockett has a question.
Well, I can tell you how mandatory reporting should show that. Should show the crabs that's caught on seaside. That should be there. Mandatory reporting should show how many crabs are caught on seaside each year.
Do you want them broken out by area, by in the Bay and
Yeah,
seaside?
because you got lower part of shore and you got eastern shore separated, so you mandatory report on that. But, to another thing, there were a few more crabbers that crabbed last year, and there were 2,000 more trips, is that correct?
Yes.
And it was 2 weeks longer.
So that would
We had
tell,
an
that would
extension
tell
we
me
didn't have
that,
the year before.
that would tell me that the harvest should be up, because there's 2,000 more trips made and more people crabbing.
Yeah,
correct?
harvest was up quite a bit.
It's about 2,000 trips is a lot of trips, more than the year previous to that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we're gonna get to the seaside in a little while.
Also, with your harvest being up, we also had a bigger limit this past year in October than what we did previously.
Yep,
So
last year we
there
did have the
Probably more
rebalance of
crabs
the
caught in
limits.
October in 2023 than 2022. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, extending the season would be more trips
Yes,
too.
but-
Yeah, those
More-
2
more
weeks
people,
plus,
more trips,
I
you
think
know.
more people harvested more, plus worked more in October because their limits were high enough where they could be profitable with the guys with the smaller licenses and all.
Even the same amount of people harvested, they made 2,000 more trips.
Correct.
Yeah, it's gotta go up.
Well, also, we're comparing this against 2022, which had the April where no one was going out fishing. So, that's, you know, when I looked at this graph from last year, that April bump just didn't exist. So, you know, I was hearing from everyone, I'm not even bothering to set my pots out, nothing's in them.
Yeah.
So, we do have that to compare as well.
So the orange line on this graph is just compared to last year?
The orange graph is, I think, a 10-year average.
That's what I thought, okay.
I tell you, I'm surprised that May is as high as it is, you know, because a lot of people take up in May. I mean, everywhere. I mean, traditionally, May is the worst month we have, wouldn't you say so? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially up our way. I'm surprised to see it that high. I thought it would be probably half of that.
Well, you can see in the average line, just about every year, we get
It
that
drops,
immediate
yeah.
drop off.
Yeah, from April to May, yeah.
Any other questions? Or anything else you guys would like to see next year that I haven't presented here?
I'd like to see the Seaside report on crab that's caught on Seaside.
Got a note on that.
In the same scenario, trip days, how many trips were made, males, females. It's good, because if we don't never get it, we'll never have nothing to go by, you know, in that area.
Yeah, I think adding to what Marshall said, I think looking at can we do trips by day? Like trips by week period? I think it'd be interesting to see what those extensions actually gave us in terms of number of trips.
I know I can easily do months by,
Even by.
once you get finer,
It gets tough.
it gets a little tough, but,
We'll see,
I know in the
normal-
past, when I've
normal
looked at
Seaside,
December,
we
I've done
caught
like
a lot of food
half
during the
month
day 'cause it's
inter-
water shoulder,
inter-
water.
intervals, so I can maybe look at that.
Okay.
Alexa, how do you figure a trip? Just by one harvest report?
One harvester with one gear on one day.
I got a question about the wreck harvest. How can we go about kind of making them accountable, like we are held accountable, to help try to realize how many crabs they are actually taking?
That is a very large question, because by law, we can't require a license for anyone fishing less than 2 pots for personal use. So we have no idea how many people are fishing those 2 pots, except through a 15-year-old phone survey, I believe. That's kind of where our estimate is when we're calculating exploitation for the bay. It found that recreational harvest is usually about 8% of commercial.
6%.
But because we don't have names, numbers, addresses, effort, harvest from anyone in Virginia who wants to fish 2 pots, that's gonna be a very big lift.
Thank you.
$1.15 million on the Seaside last year.
That's 6% of the total harvest.
That's what?
That's 6% of the total harvest of the
Yep.
state.
That's what we used to always
Total
figure,
harvest.
6%.
You would have to have a number of crabbers on that, would
I'm doing the best I can.
you?
No, I'll see what I can do. I'll keep talking, I'll work on it.
Like I said, I've taken down notes for things you guys are asking for this year. I can include next year.
And say again, how many, what's your percentage of total harvest is recreational?
We say 8%.
8%.
So that was based on a telephone survey that has been conducted both in Virginia and Maryland separately.
But that was 15 years ago.
About that. I think it was
When we had
09
decent
was
population.
Jones and Ashburn.
I always used to hear 6%, you know, but we always, years and years and years and years, that's all, what they always used.
You know, I'd love to get better numbers. I saw a presentation last year from someone who did a tagging study, released a bunch of tagged crabs, and then when people called in, hey, I caught this, they asked, are you commercial or recreational? You know, love to see something like that, but that's statewide a big lift. That was, I think, in one tributary.
Yeah.
Any other questions of Alexi?
Right, well, next item on the agenda is going to be discussion of possible management responses. So, as usual, the jurisdictions got together and said, how do we want to respond to the survey? Because we did stay the population did stay fairly stable, we did want to keep about the status quo. So we're going to have the same season and bushel limits as last year, and yes, that does include December. And then still recommending closure of the winter dredge fishery. As for what changes staff is recommending for this year, we got a lot of questions because season opening was on Sunday this year. So we're adding a clarification that pots may be baited or set on Sundays, not retrieved, not harvested. And then we're recommending extension of the daily time limits to be from 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. during the lawful season. And this will eliminate the alternate hours permit and the medical exception permit. I know that was something the committee did discuss in their work session. You know, bushel limits are still there, so we don't see this as an increase to harvest so much as increased opportunity, fishing opportunity for people to take that bushel limit. And it also gives a little more flexibility for people who want to be fishing out of the hottest hours.
Alexa, can you clarify what the season, tell me the dates for the low limits and the high limits, what you're proposing? I mean, going to November 1st with the high limits and going till December 15th, correct?
December 16th.
16th. And March 17th to May 15th for the low limits in the spring.
Low bushel
All
limits.
November and December would be the reduced limit,
Yeah.
which is the same.
We're just gonna check on when the low
From
bushel.
the 17th through May 15th in the spring, correct?
While they're pulling that up, any other questions?
Can you go through just the time limits that we currently have, just as a reminder?
So it's currently 6 to 2, and then it would be 5 to 1 in June, July, August.
And the medical exemption, you can go an hour earlier.
Well, the medical exception, it would have been whenever your doctor said you could. The alternate hours shifted 1 hour early.
Okay, right,
So now they get rid of both exemptions.
okay.
When can we start at
Like
3
there was
a.m.?
one big concern about Seaside, a lot of times they.
Any changes accepted by the commission on June 25th, that meeting will go into place July 5th. So, every year, put regulations into place, June commission meeting, go into effect July 5th, and then everything's effective until July 4th of the next year.
Question on the time limit, does that make it easier on law enforcement? No, it's 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. and there's not exemptions and things like that. How does that tend to?
I couldn't speak to that.
Law enforcement was for it.
So, high bushel limits will be July 5th through October 31st. And then the low bushel limits will be November 1st through December 16th.
July the fifth, should be May the 15th, shouldn't it?
July 5th is when
Excuse
bushel
me,
limits
sorry.
start each year.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to speak on this time frame. I spoke last time about Eastern Shore Seaside. And one of the problems that we have with this time limit on the seaside, we have a 5-foot drop in tide. We have oyster rocks, marshes everywhere. And what happens in the spring, sometimes you'll get a northwest wind blowing a gale, and the boats on the seaside are normally skiffs, they have no radars. And a lot of times because of the tide, if it's foggy early in the morning, 8 or 9 o'clock, the fog will lift. This time limit hurts everybody there. It's not like the bay, you can go anytime, anywhere, got plenty of water. And anyone who's been there, I talked to Ron, he's familiar with the seaside, this man's familiar with the seaside. It's totally different, whole new world there. And there are small boats, and we catch 6% of the total catch. And my problem with the time limit is not only with seaside, but with the bay itself. We're on a pot limit. We can only fish so many pots, and we can only catch so many crabs. So you got a pot limit, and you got a bushel limit. Why do we have a time limit? Because you already restrict us to the amount of pots we can fish, and you already restrict us to the amount of crabs we can catch. And then you restrict us to the time that we can work. So if you're working in an area where I live, where you've got marshes and oyster rocks and shoals and bars, that doesn't work.
Well, that's something else that this time limit extension was designed to help. You know, I know at the work sessions it did come up that the tide on the eastern shore, on the seaside, a lot different. So rather than saying, all right, the eastern shore gets, 2 hours early to 2 hours early, any of that, give you the flexibility of having a wider time limit for the daily.
Explain to me that again, what you just said.
So one option could have been, in the bay.
Around 3 o'clock in the morning, we got small skiffs, we got marshes, we got oyster jumps, you can't see anything. We don't have radars. In the bay, you got a radar. On the seaside, you leave out at daylight. That's why I want to separate. I want to separate these two, the seaside of the eastern shore. I'd like to get that separated. Ron, help me out here. You've been on the seaside. You've been on the seaside. You know we can't go out 3 o'clock in the morning, face pots. Ron, you've been on the seaside. You ever ran ashore yet? Tell the truth now. Huh? You ever run ashore in the bay? You ever run ashore in the bay? In the bay? You might have went on the beach then. That's, at the last meeting, it was my understanding that you were looking for some regulation changes. And this is what I'm interested in changing regulations, separate the two. And the fellows from, I don't know about the rivers. I don't go to rivers. These folks can speak for themselves. That's where they work at. But when you work on the eastern shore, this doesn't work. And a 6% catch, that's not much in the total harvest. And we can't work these hours. That will not work.
So let me ask a question, just make a proposal kind of thing. 12 hours in the bay, 12 hours on seaside, where you have a line you draw that says this is on seaside. What time would be the earliest you would start in the summer? Well, I mean, on June 21st, when it gets light earliest.
Most of it go out about a half hour before sunrise.
So sunrise on June 21st is about 5 o'clock?
I was gonna say 6:10 maybe.
6:10.
No.
So,
And 5 o'clock. Yeah.
It's brighter on Seaside as well. I'll go over there.
Like 4:30 till 4 o'clock in the afternoon or something would work, because you can't run over there in the dark.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm suggesting, is that we have 12 hours for both areas, and you just set the 12 hours starting at different times. And for the bay, where people, like Pete said the other day, want to be able to work when it's still dark, or can, you make it 3 AM to 3 PM. The seaside Eastern Shore, you make it 5 o'clock, 4:30. It's not being on the water, it's working. So 5 o'clock to 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I like
Or something along those lines, to make it so that.
Is that a motion?
We did,
No, I'm just suggesting.
we did say in the CMAC, in the work, meeting that we had, that y'all already have a distinct line in place that separates the bayside from the seaside. I think you said it's the road that goes up.
US 13, yes.
Yeah, 13.
Yeah.
So I don't see how that would be hard to police
And north.
or enforce.
I would say.
No, it's the docks itself. I mean, if you work seaside, you can't come around the bay and unload. You know, you're there. You're in that area.
And that would be, I imagine, harder to enforce, that someone can't start earlier and then go to the other side, finish later.
Mr. Nixon.
I don't know how many of you remember why we put this time limit on.
Yeah, we're limited to what we can catch and
It was
what
to
we fish.
prevent people from fishing huge rigs of ponds.
That's law enforcement.
Well.
Why should we
no,
get
no, no,
punished
no,
for
no.
that?
I'm talking about, this was before we got to all these license limits and everything's been reduced uprivers. Are we sitting there arguing about something we don't really need anyway?
Yeah, that just was done in 2003.
I just got through saying, we're limited how much we catch and how many spots we can fish. Now we're limited to time.
Has it been effective at keeping people from fishing huge
No.
rigs of ponds?
No.
I think that is a good
This was the point that I
question.
raised back in October. There's so much of this stuff on the books, and we're sitting here wasting time talking about something
No.
we don't need anyway.
Hey, I was out there, that was down when the Merliner showed up many years ago with 1,000 pots. That's when that
But the bushel
happened.
limits take care of all that now.
Yeah.
What are you gonna set 1,000 pots for with the bushel limits?
Can we
they
go
got?
back,
Yep.
back years ago and get anything good with the good crab was not like.
Bushel limit.
Done by 9 o'clock. They were trying to meet the heat, they weren't gonna fish the huge rigs of ponds, they were fishing whatever they were gonna fish. Now we have people with 2 or 3 licenses and stuff like that, where everybody's working on time. It just makes my head hurt to think about, we're sitting here arguing about something we don't really even need.
Would staff take
I
on
appreciate
that?
Yeah, that's what we need. We need staff. We need staff. I've repeated this many times in many meetings, for many years. If the crab committee and staff can get together and work on something, and we can both agree on it, you know for yourself, most of the time, the commission agrees with it. It's when them don't like it, staff don't like it, and we do, kiss it goodbye. But if we can get everybody on the same page, it works most of the time.
Well, that's the idea of the
And
work
so what I'd like to
sessions
see staff
is,
do and VIMs do is to get together and look at the separation of the two. And Pete brought up a good point. Why do we need a time limit to start with? Based on the fact you can't fish for this many pots and you can't catch for this many bushel. Why do you put us, in this time frame? I said it many years ago, God forbid it ever happens, but at some point in time, it's caused somebody to get drowned, because when it's blowing a gale, and in these small boats, you say, okay, I gotta be done by this time. And you go out and somebody lose their life from no kind of this, because you're limited to the amount of time you can work. That's going to happen, because people will go to work knowing that shouldn't go, but I got to be done, got to have it done by this time. And it's possible, because it happens a lot. These folks are familiar with that. A southwest wind that can blow a gale at 8 or 9, 10 o'clock and drop right out slick cam. Am I right? But a lot of times we go when we shouldn't go because of that time. And when the man goes out and gets drowned because of that, you'll hear about it from me here. That's what happened.
so, and for extreme weather events, the regulation does still have, the commissioner has the authority to lift the daily time limits. So we know, a hurricane is coming or something, the commissioner can lift the daily time limits for everyone to safely get their pots out of the water.
Day.
Yes, sir.
You know, keeping the river open later in the afternoon, you're gonna inevitably create a lot more people going part-time and doing stuff after work and having another job. It's inevitable because, you know, most people still work during the day for the regular job, so you're gonna inevitably create more part-timers. I can assure you, and a lot of the people that are gonna be working later in our area are gonna be people that don't get up early because they're up all night, and they probably don't follow a lot of other rules, and you're gonna have a recipe for disaster because they watch what people are doing as good as we know what we're doing, you know what I mean? And you don't have too much trouble with people showing up to work early, but you're opening a can of worms when you keep it open
I
all day.
said that when I started, I don't follow the rivers, I stay away from that, I'm interested in this.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I get it, I'm just saying inevitably, you're gonna open up a can of worms.
That happens in your area.
You can best believe you're gonna open up a can.
Yeah, to the part-timers, and it'd be interesting to do the analysis, like, it was done back in 2002 for Taylor and Murphy, when we were talking about license fees and such. We looked at what the dockside value was by commercial license, and about a third of them were less than $10,000 a year. And an analysis like that would probably be worth doing again, and I can dig up the data that we did then.
We kind of did that for COVID. We did that when we were going through disaster relief.
Right, so to look at it and say, how many part-time and how many full-time? And I don't have anything against part-time commercial fishermen, but I would rather give more to the full-time commercial fishermen.
I don't have anything against it either, but I just watched with the other spring, we were on the low limits, and if people catch them, the price drops. The last thing we need is more, I mean, it works good the way, I mean, it's bad enough now if everybody catches them. The last thing we need is more people out there, more people putting them on, because the market just won't stand it. I mean, it's not there. I mean, we were catching, I don't even remember what the limit was the other spring, and caught them for a couple days, and there's people that didn't even have a market. So, I mean, I don't see no reason to pull people out of the bushes if that's where their stuff is. It'd be a good place to stay.
Yeah, because this year we did have about 42% latent effort. That was licenses that people are eligible for who did not fish them. And now we have done analysis of that before that shows, like, in a good year, people aren't more likely to jump into the fishery than in a bad year. But as far as allowing for part-timers, that's not something we've looked at. And we've looked at, I don't have that graph with me today, but we have in the past looked at number of days per waterman. So how many fished 0 to 10 days, how many fished 10 to 20 days, and so on. So we've kind of looked at part-time effort in that way, but dollar value is interesting.
But when you look at part-time effort in days, you are taking into account somebody, for example, who peel their pots during the spring, and then they gill net.
That's
the rest of the year.
not the guys I'm talking about. I'm
Yeah.
talking about the guys pulling the grass cutting trailer, the guy working down at the shipyard. I don't think somebody that's peeling pot and going crabbing, that's not exactly, that's not the intent of what I'm saying.
And that's why you need to not just look at the days crab, but you need to look at what they're earning being a commercial fisherman. And yes, I agree, doesn't have to be, $50,000, $100,000 a year earnings to be worthy of being called a full-time commercial fisherman, but somewhere there's gotta be a cutoff where it's like, this is really a part-time person, they made $3,000. They paid more than $3,000 maintaining their boat and being
What
insured.
they'll do, they'll go catch a bushel or two, fish 50, 80, 100 pots, go sell them to somebody cheaper than what all the regular guys are selling to them. It's a recipe for disaster is what it is.
So,
Go ahead, Mr. Moore.
so we obviously talked about the different time frames during the work session. Was there discussion among staff about a different time limit for the Eastern Shore, for the seaside?
Not outside of the work session. That is something we can bring to the next one, which should be sometime later this year.
And you probably don't know this off the top of your head, but do you know how many medical exemptions are on the seaside?
I don't know Seaside, but this is all together.
Okay.
That first row is number of medical exceptions. And now that's not number of medical applications we receive each year. Because generally, when someone applies for it in 1 year, it's been pre-authorized for the next few years. So it could be someone in 2023 applied in 2021 and doesn't need it anymore. So we don't have exact numbers on how many people need medical exceptions per year. But that's how many medical were pre-authorized in that year. And then the alternate hours, that's available to anyone, and they do have to apply every year. So that's how many were approved in each year, applied for and approved.
Generally only approved if they're medical related?
No, anyone can say, I want to fish an hour early, finish an hour early, and if we don't have any reason not to, it's granted. There's a cutoff, I think,
May 15th.
yeah.
There's two of them are sitting right here.
You can't apply after that.
Your number's low,
Hmm?
12 for 2023.
That's the only ones that can do it legally, JC.
We don't get many.
Yeah, it's low though, trust me.
That's the ones that have the permit to do it.
Yeah,
That's not what
exactly.
to do it.
So what I'm getting at,
Thinking of object.
if we accepted staff recommendation for changes this year, worked on the next work session, to get your point, you still would have an alternate hour avenue for some folks if they wanted it?
Alternate
Not
hour
as
would be
currently
less than what that actually is.
I think he means to have something different for the Seaside.
Yeah, that's what
Not as currently written, but if that was something CMAC wanted to recommend, they could.
Is that something we need to make a motion for?
What I would suggest is, this is one of the items moving forward. If you want an alternative for the Seaside, then propose that. And if you want to put in a motion for the 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. for the rest of the state, you can do that. We're here to listen to what you want to tell us.
Motion to approve the 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. for everything except the Seaside.
And what for the Seaside?
Somebody else will
Let
figure that one
pick
out.
that.
You would need a second on the motion.
Well, we think,
I'll make a motion for Seaside from 5 to 5.
do you want to,
I'd like
do you
for
want
staff, I'd like for staff to, work on it, investigate it, and, see what you come up with, see what the catch is, and how many individuals will work in it.
for procedure, do you want to make the full motion, or Mr. Spencer want to make the first motion, then you give a friendly amendment?
Let's split it up.
All right.
Yeah.
Because staff is in agreement, right, with three, that's what you guys, because the work session did mention the Seaside about having it, and then you guys kind of, I guess, spoke and said 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. I get a yes and I get a no, I'm not sure.
I wasn't on the work.
We weren't on the work.
We weren't on the
No,
work.
okay, so let me clarify, the work groups, it was talked about delineating between the Bayside and Seaside for time limits for us, and then we were talking about trying to get something that had a medium rate, and then keeping the Seaside separate because of the tidal issues. And then we came up with, we can't really work earlier on the Seaside because of the marshes and all the flats and all the oyster rocks. So that's when, I guess, somewhere in the mix, I guess, staff came up with 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. without thinking of the Seaside aspect of it, which is okay. But now that it's here, we can make a friendly amendment and keep it separate for the Seaside.
All right, so your motion was approve 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. for everywhere
Except Seaside.
but Seaside. And
And is that
unfortunately,
Seaside of the Eastern Shore, which is the area that needs it specifically, versus Seaside, including Virginia Beach and east of the Chesapeake Pavement Stop?
Just go east of the
Seaside is known as Seaside, I think. We call that Oceanside.
Eastern side of US 13.
okay, so the current motion is to approve 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. for everywhere but the Seaside.
Seaside Eastern Shore.
But the Seaside, we'd hope to go to 5 to 5.
Um,
And then there was
I
an
think we need a
amendment,
second before we make a friendly.
Marshall, you can make a friendly amendment, we
Need a
can
second
accept the
before we make
amendment,
a-
and we can vote vote once.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
all
good at
right.
this, I do this all the time.
I'll second Spencer's.
You made a motion, we had a second to that, you can make a friendly amendment to that where you can say include Eastern Shore 5 AM to 5 PM.
Yeah, that was his, so you're okay with that, Spencer?
Yes, sir.
And you're okay with that?
Yes, sir.
So we're gonna have that as a friendly amendment and vote on that. 3 and 3 on everywhere in Virginia, 5 to 5 Seaside. That good? We all right on voting on that, fellas?
To approve 3 AM to 3 PM for everywhere but the Seaside, and to approve 5 AM to 5 PM for the Seaside.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right, unanimous decision. That's a motion. I think that makes sense, fellas. That's a 5 to 5 on Seaside. You're right, no need to kill yourself to catch a crab. You know? What's next, Alexa?
Next would be other business. This is if the committee has any other business to bring before the committee.
Yes, sir.
Can we go back to, the thing you had status quo? Yeah, I'd like to talk about the closure of the winter dredge fishery. And seeing if we could get somewhere with that, as far as opening it up on well, it'd probably be a smaller scale than when it was closed. But to get Virginia back to a year-round fishery.
I know that's something the work sessions are intended to work out, but if you want to discuss it today, you can.
Yes, please. Because we had been talking about it, trying to get it open and to get it open for January and February and have a poundage cap on it, like 1.5 million pounds for anybody that decides to go. And the 1.5 million pounds would not hurt our overall population. It would be a small percentage of it. Almost just like, I think in the female harvest or something, it said 2%. One way or the other, it could go either way. The 1.5 million pounds wouldn't make a lot of difference. And I do know Ram said in one of the last couple meetings I've been to that he was not against that as long as it was on a softer bottom instead of a harder bottom. Anybody else want to help me over here?
I have a
Further, we'll have good discussion. Who's next? Go ahead, sir.
My question would be, as far as trying to put something together by the June commission meeting, do we have the ability to say, these are the areas, like, here's a map that you're gonna put together to say, this is the soft bottom, this is the hard bottom?
That would have to happen after the June commission meeting, but that, you still have 6 months before.
Supposed to have an updated one.
That's already been done.
What?
To determine hard bottoms, that was done years ago.
Yeah, there was a
That was a
study
map
years
already
ago.
done, that's been
It's a
done.
new, it's a new one, now, right?
Yeah, we had that.
Ken, we did the study,
Yeah.
and that's where that,
Yeah.
suggestion came from, that you have it on.
Yeah. But I thought it was a newer one done here recently.
Pull over into the bay.
Public map.
Yep.
Let me just say something about the work group, first of all. This was a discussion in the work group. Joe Grist, who was heading up that work group for us, sent you all an email on the 29th of April telling you his situation. The decision was made by the administration that we're gonna put the work group on hold for now, while Joe's dealing with his issues, and I'm not gonna go into that at all. You all been told. So that's where we are with that. To do something in January, in June. We just found out on May 20th that there's been another change to our administrative process, where our administrative process used to be as little as 45, used to be 20 days and it went to 45. Our administrative process is gonna go to 12 weeks, where it has to be, because of additional administrative review. So something that we wanna take forward in September has to be ready to go by 3 months. Something we want to do in September has to be done. And it's kind of threw us for a loop because we were pretty much working on like a 45-day cycle, and this came out and it was effective immediately, and all of a sudden we had to pull some things off the agenda as a result.
So
So,
it happened in the middle of this crab management cycle, so we may have to revisit timing of things for next year, but we will cross that
So-
bridge when we get to
so
it.
we're rapidly looking at our schedule and try to adjust it so that we can get these things done as soon as we can. So just be aware of that. If anything we do now is further administrative review that has to go through the process.
Is there an exemption in that for staying in compliance?
Yes. So ASMFC compliance, council compliance, things like that. Yes, there are. Otherwise, we'd be in very big trouble. So just to let you know, that's the situation we're in. We are still looking at this. You know, we're in a holding pattern with it right now, so.
But the work
Pat,
sessions
did
leave work
we
plan-
get all the surveys back?
Excuse me?
The surveys that were sent out,
What surveys?
on the crab dredge fishing, was sent out to the license holders?
I think they got a lot of them back, I think.
I'm just wondering if you had
Yeah,
a
see,
number of them.
unfortunately, Joe's been doing that. so-
Okay.
And I haven't seen any of them.
Yeah.
Can I ask a general question?
Go ahead.
To Ron. How do you feel about crab dredging? Would them be in support of that? The way that you mentioned it back in 2012 or 2013, going on with salt?
I haven't changed my views on
So
it.
your views are you?
But you have to, you would have to offset that. You have to compensate for whatever you expect to get out of the dredge.
Okay, so if we have a hard number of 1.5 million pounds, and we just compensate down the road in another fishery, VIMS would be in total support of that? Or,
If you compensate, yeah.
okay.
Hold on just a minute.
You shouldn't have to
Yeah.
compensate.
We shouldn't have.
Yeah, hold on just a minute now. Compensate, so if we catch 1.5 million pounds crab dredging, we got to give 1.5 million pounds up somewhere else. Is that what, is that?
Throw some name between Virginia and Maryland.
Upward.
Well, any increase will increase our exploitation rate, and we do have to mind the exploitation rate with the biological reference points.
But you already said a while ago it was 42% or something latent effort. And when you look at what you can take out of the fishery every year, you take every crab pot license, the high bushel limit that they can catch every day of the year and add them all up. So if it's 42% latent effort, that is a minimum of 25% of the crabs that we could catch that we could use somewhere else.
No, that's not the way. it
No,
works.
harvest is actual realized reported harvest. We don't assume anything is coming from people who don't report,
Except for recreation.
except for recreational.
Which is, you don't know 8%.
Mr. Reynolds?
So I want to clarify what Spencer, I think, is trying to get at, is that we base our limits and everything, is that everyone that has a crab pot license goes to work that year.
No.
No,
No, that's what he's getting at, that we have, basically, he's saying as a quota system, if everybody had a crab license, went to work that year, we would still be okay to go the following year, based on the bushel limits. That's the reason why, because imagine if we do 100% effort, and everybody goes to work, which isn't possible, we had that many crabs left over. That's what we base all of our regulation on, if everybody goes to work. It's the same thing with every other fishery, rockfish, you name it. Yes, it
No,
is.
the model for the crab fishery, just like other fisheries without a quota, like spot croaker, is that next year's gonna be as far as effort and latent effort, is gonna be like this year. Or this year's gonna be like last year. That's the model they're working under, and it is generally true. You look at the latent effort, and it's a pretty steady percentage of the number of pellet.
Alexa, would you kind of weigh in here as a staff member for what really happens or what?
so I think part of the confusion, I think you're talking about having a fishery-wide quota. I don't think we've been, okay, perhaps I'm misunderstanding.
No, what I think Mr. Heather was talking about is just that, is that we base every regulation in all fisheries as if people are gonna go to work. We can't base it on the average of, oh, some years this many people go to work, we're gonna base it off of that. It's the same reason why the striped bass fishery in the ocean, we know that quota was gonna get caught every year, it's proven every year. So that, the 7% cut, we had to do. We didn't do it on the bay quota yet, right? Because every year year, we turn that bakeboard to inch. It's the same thing, what he's referring to, we have all these crab pot licenses, and even if a quarter of them of late effort go back to work, we still, based on our limits and the cuts that we take, we are still gonna be okay with the amount of exploitation rate that we have. So moving
I wouldn't say that, because when we go into these meetings, when we say, let's maintain status quo, that is assuming that everyone who fished last year will fish exactly the same this year. No more people entering the fishery, no pandemic to make people stay at home. That's if last year was the same as this year. If we had quarter of the people with latent effort jump in, our harvest would very much increase, and depending on how many crabs we have, that could exceed our exploitation rate reference points.
2009, we had over 1,300 active crabbers, right? Now we have less than 800. I believe if you pull up the data, it was like the first year was a big jump in active crab potters because crab dredging to stop. So we have all these active crabbers. If that many went back, is it safe to say that they caught less than what Mr. Headley was talking about, 1.5 million cap for our dredge survey? Which, mind you, we already came to an agreement on this last fall that staff, and then we said, okay, well, let's get a 5-boat experimental survey for CMAC. This was already agreed upon, and it fell through for this past winter. That was agreed upon.
The only assumptions are things this year, when we're making management decisions, is things staying the same as they were in recent times. If we had to say 2022, we had to take a reduction of 5%-ish. We said, this is the harvest from the last, I think it was somewhere in 3 to 5 years. If we had changed the regulations in those 3 to 5 years, what would we be catching? We're not going back to 2008 and saying if we had this many people and they were fishing this hard. We're only comparing to recent years. And the latent effort has been at minimum 27%, and that was in 2009. So those people between the blue and the orange line do not come into our calculations at all, because they haven't shown, like I said, we've looked at latent effort by year. Do more people enter the fishery when when crab abundance is up or when harvest is up? We haven't seen that. So those people do not come into our calculations. So if for some reason 42% of the licensees jump back into the fishery, there is a very good chance we would exceed our exploitation rates.
Where do you come up with, or how? I'm a little confused on this, which is not hard for you to do. Since I don't crab in the bay anymore, I haven't caught a limit in years. I just don't fish like that. How does that reflect how many people are like me in this fishery? But you figure me as being able to catch that limit, correct?
No, they figure you are gonna catch the same next year.
How do you set your harvest limits based on the number of crabbers, and you don't know what they're gonna catch?
We have done analysis of how many.
I mean, I might change next year. I got a big boat I'm just about to finish up. I might hire 2 more people and set them off.
Last year when we were changing the bushel limits, we did do an analysis of how many people approached the bushel limit. And it was, I don't have the numbers in my head. I don't have them in the slide. I can get that for you at a future
No, I don't
point.
need
But
it. I'm just trying to figure out the theory of how you set bushel limits based on the number of crabbers, and then you say that you gotta make up the difference. But a lot bigger, somebody's difference already.
we're not trying to achieve when we look at harvest for the next year, we are not trying to achieve a certain number of pounds. generally what we're doing is trying to achieve a reduction or liberalization from the previous years. And so we don't need to know exactly how many every person caught and add those up and add these and multiply by this. All we're doing is saying if we shortened if we shortened this by 2 weeks, the harvest that happened in these 2 weeks would go away. And so we're only looking at that difference.
But if you do, for example, a bushel limit reduction, and you were to do an analysis beforehand to figure out how much it would be, you would look at the distribution function for the harvested by person per day, and then you would say, if we lopped off the last 2 bushels out of that distribution function and put them all into the highest that we had left, that gives you the expected harvest the next year.
Yeah, so let's say we went, for some reason we had to go from 10 bushels to 8 bushels. If someone caught under 8 bushels, we'd say they'll do the same thing they did. If someone caught 9 or 10 bushels, we'd say that's a reduction of 1 or 2 bushels. And we do that across the fishery.
That makes sense.
So we're not saying the people who caught 8 are also going to catch 20% less, because the only thing constraining them is that bushel limit that they achieved.
Mr. Moore?
Yeah, going back, and I think I've been at all the discussions recently, and I think we have a long ways to go before we could consider reopening dredge fishery at this point. I think there's the payback piece, I think there's a soft bottom piece that we need to talk about. Also, we're coming out of a year where we're, I think, 2 years removed from the lowest winter dredge survey we've ever had. We went down by 20 million adult females, which is what this portion of the population targets in the fishery. I don't think we would be on solid footing to say we're going to add a lot more, or maybe it's not a lot, but we're going to add more catch specifically on that segment of the population. I think it's something we can continue to discuss, but I can't see a reason why that's something we would want to introduce at this time in the Commonwealth.
Well, and also we are, I won't say in the middle, at the beginning of a benchmark stock assessment process that is looking at new data, new methods, new models. We should have those results finalized and peer-reviewed by early 2026. So at that point, we'll be able to see where we are with updated reference points, and do we consider changes to how we look at crab management.
I still think Virginia would benefit greatly from having a year-round crab fishery. And I'd like to see where the committee stands if I made the motion to open crab judging this winter.
But I want to just make sure everybody kind of understands one thing, which is what Ron said, is that it's not going to be a freebie. It's got to come out of the cookie jar. It's not a free cookie coming off the shelf somewhere. It's going to come out of our catch, your catch, all right? Everybody understands that.
If I'm not mistaken.
Because what I've heard from discussion is some are not understanding that's the case.
But if we catch
If
a
I'm
million
not
and a half
mistaken-
pounds crab judging, we might have to give up 1.5 million pounds of crab pot.
That's correct, exactly.
But we were told at the work session that everything that we talked about in that work session would not have any effect on giving back or taking away from anything else.
I don't think that would, I think.
I think they can be considered at different times. You know, at the work session, you don't need to figure out if we do this, we do this. If we do that, we do that. However, this year, the jurisdictions did agree to maintain status quo. So status quo for 1 year would be if we increase harvest by this much with a new fishery, we would have to decrease harvest somewhere else.
Well, one thing I agree with Spencer. I don't think it should affect the crab fishery unless we exceed the exploitation rate. That's what we manage on, you know. That was down last year, 25%. We got 9% leeway there. So if it exceeds the exploitation rate, then we take it away from the crab pot fisher. If it don't, then it should stay like it is, I think. I mean, that's my opinion.
When the fishery was closed, it only accounted for 10% of the harvest.
All the crab judge.
It would be less than that now with the people.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it was last year, it was 10%. We had I can't remember his name, we had a biologist from VIMS come up, and he looked at the commission, he said, this doesn't make much sense. He said, you have 3 spigots running, you have one of them at a drip, and 2 of the others running wide open, which are crab potty and peeler potty, and he said, you're gonna shut the one off with the drip, and expect to get some results out of it that are beneficial.
And we have seen results since 2008. We've seen
Well, if you had 10%.
much higher adult and adult female numbers.
10% of last year's harvest, you're talking about 1.8 million pounds. So you'd be less than 10% at 1.5 million. Is that 1.5 million gonna run us over the exploitation rate on that number from last year?
We won't know until next year, but with adult females down, if harvest stays the same, the exploitation rate next year would increase. That's without adding anything else in.
I mean, you might not even need 1.5 million pounds for it, because if when it comes time to rig up, everybody says they're gonna go, but the amount of people that would actually put the rig on the boat and go, you may not even need that much for the amount of people. Just because they say yeah, anybody you ask is gonna say yeah, but I got a good idea when it comes time to go buying all this stuff and rigging up and getting stuff out of the bushes. I just can't see it being too many. I don't know about what anybody else thinks. I just can't see it being some massive push.
Well, I imagine at the next
It's
work,
not gonna, you don't understand, 'cause dude.
I imagine at the next work session, we'll see the results of that survey.
And like the boats, most people don't even got boats and stuff to do it anymore. People are, I mean, I don't think that, I think it's definitely worth looking into, because you need a year-round fishery. The more times that Virginia can have crabs on the market, the better off it's gonna be for everybody. But, I mean, we may not even, when it comes down to it, if it ain't but a certain amount of boats go, come up with a smaller number, even don't even, I mean.
They used to have the
it's
number
worth
how many
looking.
people were still eligible.
I understand, but if you call the people, everybody's gonna say, oh yeah, because they think they're gonna get something out of it or something. When it comes time to go, like I said, it's not gonna be too many people putting all that stuff. Like a lot of the people are gonna have to build it from scratch. What are they gonna go dig something that was 30 years old, 20 years ago out of the bushes? I mean,
A-frame ain't nothing but rust.
that's what I'm
That's no more
saying.
good.
I just don't see this massive, it's not like it's gonna be free. And a lot of the guys have sold the boats and stuff. It's something worth looking into. The people, but we really have to see who's gonna do it and then base it on that. 'Cause as far as what you send out, you could open it to everybody in the whole state. It ain't gonna be but a certain, what do you think, Spencer? I mean, how many, do you see a bunch of people just running and buying drudges, A-frames,
I'm saying
hoisters?
20.
Huh?
I'm saying 20 at the most.
And that'd be at the best of it.
Yes.
And that could be if you opened it to everybody in the whole state of Virginia. The people are gone. The people are gone. I just don't, the boats are gone, the people are gone.
And we got old.
Like he
I
said.
think what we need to do with it, I think in this situation, we need to get staff to look into it, VIM's look into it, and come back and let them give us their report.
They gotta find out a way to find out how many people are really gonna do it.
And then
As
we
far
can
as
bite
just,
into it at
we're
that
just,
point in time.
we're just talking.
I
like-
still want to make the motion to open it this winter because it
Oh,
comes in front of the commission
I
next month.
agree. I mean, I'm all for it, but I'm just saying we may not even need 1.5 million.
Yeah.
When it comes down to the time to do it. So you're really talking, like I said, I know it sounds great. People think they're gonna be out there with their rakes scooping them females up, but I really do not see that happening.
Well, they have a list of individuals that's still eligible. I was still on that list many years ago, so maybe staff can call those individuals and.
Well, they sent a survey out to people. They did this, they did that, but a lot of the people are gone.
I never got it.
If the people are gonna say, if you say something, they're gonna say yeah, because they think they can sell it or lease it out or agent it, but I just don't see it being, I think it's worth looking into, but I just don't see it being people coming out of the woodworks. I would be.
I make a motion to open crab judging this winter.
I'll say.
Second. Okay. Any more discussion? All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All Against, say nay.
That was, can we get hands? Yeah.
Raise your hands on the name.
Shocker.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on this year's, or do we want to move on to other business?
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Spencer, on y'all's work group, did y'all discuss black sponge crab?
We did. Wait a minute. No, we didn't.
Okay.
But, it is to my understanding that by the time that the black sponge, if it came in front of the commission right now, it would be over with for the year. So that would be something that we need to bring back in the fall.
The idea with the work sessions is that first one was an overarching, what do we want to talk about?
Okay.
And then in the future meetings, which will, I believe, resume this fall or late summer, it's to get deeper into each item.
Okay.
So it's, you know, because one item can lead into another, can lead into another. If we just drill down into one, then there can be a comprehensive plan for when, if it comes time to make that change.
Okay.
Okay, that's somebody else down in there. Go ahead.
And you say by the time the commission no, the commission is making regulations in June for the next year. So if they made the regulation, it would be the next time that people are worrying about dark sponge crabs. Which
Yeah, but-
would be May, June of next year.
Yeah, but June 15th, the dark sponge crab law goes out of effect.
But the laws, if we put the laws in effect July first, they will be good until July first the next year. And staff has put us in this model. Now, are we changing the models where we're gonna make crab regulations in the middle of the year? Or are we gonna be making them on July first?
We made changes to
June
the
isn't the
season.
only time we set regulations. When something wants to be changed for, say, March, the commission can hear it and time to enact it in March. Things can come up every year, but we have to at least set bushel limits and season dates each July for the following year.
The staff will entertain doing this.
Didn't
Go
know.
ahead.
Sanctuaries.
Maybe Mark.
I've talked to you, I've talked to several staff members about this. Junior Beach, the old sanctuary, we cannot go in the bay down below there, where the old sanctuary is. Is there anything that we can do to give some leeway where people at Lynn Haven can crab somewhere in the bay or the ocean front?
So we looked into when this came up in 2018.
Yeah, hasn't there been some discussion about shrinking the sanctuaries to a little?
It's something we can talk about. I believe, Mark, I believe the green highlight was identified as,
Yeah, originally, I thought that, I mean, realistically, you could open up, I guess it's 3 and 4, you could open up both of them, and basically the people are only gonna crab in the little green section there.
so the problem with the little green section is that is within the Chesapeake Bay Entrance Naval Restricted Area.
Well, then, I certainly hope that you decide to close down the shrimp fishery then.
Which says anchoring, trawling, crabbing, fishing, and dragging in the area are prohibited. And no object attached to a vessel or otherwise shall be placed on or near the bottom.
So that says that you cannot shrimp trawl.
Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah. I mean, the
they haven't gone that far up.
furthest I've been up is the Ramada.
That is their area, but they have not gone that far.
Okay, then I wanna go to the shrimp area. I mean, this is ridiculous.
So you wanna go just south of where the.
I wanna start at Cape Henry like we used to do and go around,
This area has been in place for
Long time.
a long time. I don't have the date in front. When you look the CFR up, that's the
Is that the one
34.
I gave you there, or is that another one?
Sorry?
Is that a number I gave somebody?
No. This is a few rules before. I think you gave me 370 maybe. But like I said, I found notes from when this came up in 2018, and this was the federal rule that came to this area.
People were crabbing down there, what, in the fifties and sixties in the oceanfront? Is that correct?
50s and 60s.
50s and 60s.
Back in your heyday.
So my question to you is, why all of a sudden can I not go there? You know, or nobody can go there? I mean, to me,
It's not sudden, it's been on the books for a good while.
so we've all been breaking the law when we could go down there, and it was never enforced. I'm quite sure.
How long has that area been like that?
I don't
Look at
have,
53, 63, and 85. Talking about paragraph 334.320.
yeah.
Yeah, last time it was updated, it was October 85.
I couldn't hear.
October 85 is the last that rule was
But
updated.
it was also put on the books potentially in 53.
Right,
The first time was in 53.
yeah, so they just carried it over year after year is what they've done.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
I
been
don't know
amended
if-
3 times.
Yeah, it might be coordinates changed or anything. I don't know if we have access to the historical.
In the 90s and early 2000s, ships, that was a ship anchorage. Right there on the west side of it was a ship anchorage 10 years ago.
You can go to that. It doesn't impede commercial fishing.
Mark, if you want us, according to this section of the code, if you want us to look into this, we have to engage with the Commandant of the 5th Naval District.
Yeah.
Probably U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and NOAA NIFS. So if the board wants us, if the committee wants us to do that, we can start the process. It's up to you.
Is that a whole lot of work? It
Um,
sounded like.
You saw the names I just
How
named.
many
Yeah.
agencies do you want?
What it sounded like.
Well, how about this one? BMRC's got control over the dates of the old sanctuary. So you can actually extend the old sanctuary to June 1st then.
It's still within that area though, isn't it?
No,
No, up in the bay.
up in
He's
the back.
talking about,
You can change the dates of the old
For
sanctuary.
the main stem.
Okay.
The original. Yeah. Yeah, you can change the dates of the historical area.
We're here to listen to you guys. If you guys want to make a recommendation, I mean, so we'll put it in for the work group to look at.
I mean,
I don't know what he's trying to say.
I'm trying to say, everywhere else in the Chesapeake Bay, you can go to work, except Lynn Haven, basically is what it comes down to.
You can't crab close to the shore, running traps and all?
Absolutely not. No. It goes all the way to the shore.
all the way to the shore from the Ocean View Pier.
Yeah, it's a lot of restrictions.
Wow.
And so,
Yeah, we carried it to the legislature one year when Owen Pickett
Yep.
was senator from Virginia Beach. And the complaint that they had with the legislature was that nobody wanted to do
it's actually changed that. Sanctuaries from the sanctuaries.
That's taken a lot away.
And there was a whole lot of crab judges that went off from where that red line is to the other area. That's the turn of the bridge out there. We used to crab, that's Cape Henry Hole and everything else.
Oh, been there.
So anyway,
There's a lot of.
in
work
order
going
to
on
go
there
down to the
all
oceanfront
winter long,
every
every winter.
it's almost impossible because it's a closed area, correct? And y'all,
If it's a federally closed area, we would have to consult with those folks I just mentioned. If it's something that's under our jurisdiction, we would have to go through the process, through our work group that we have, and go down that process. It's not gonna happen tomorrow.
oh, I know that. Nothing's gonna happen tomorrow.
It's
Hey,
interesting.
Mark, how would it, if it went from, say, the first aisle to that white box, would that help you any, that area there right off of Lynn Haven?
Well, I mean, basically what it comes down to, you cannot change any boundaries of the historical sanctuary unless you go through the General Assembly, is
Oh,
that
no, you
correct?
can change it.
They can't change
The sections of the sanctuary which are in code.
That's different.
There are some that are and some that aren't.
But you can change the dates that it open and closes, is that correct?
If it's in regulation.
No, he's saying that the state and I don't know that this is true, somebody has to look at it. He's suggesting that the state code has wording that permits the commission to change the dates. And I've find it hard to believe that you could change it to open it. I believe that you can change it to close it more.
Again, Mark, those are things we'd have to look at.
Yeah, you can change the dates because,
I think we would change it to June.
2008 or 2009, when you were starting to make reductions, you couldn't do anything to the historical sanctuary because you couldn't change the dates. You can change the dates now. You can make your dates anytime you want.
It is unlawful for any person to take or catch crabs for resale from the following area, except during those periods established pursuant to regulations adopted by the commission.
Right, regulations. And that's dates. But as far as actually changing boundaries, you don't have the ability to do that unless you go back to the General Assembly. And then you can possibly change the way that you align that by going to like a 35-foot, depth, like you did for the rest of the Chesapeake Bay. Follow where I'm coming from? In other words, if you draw a straight line from Cape Henry Light up to the foot of the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel on the southern side, and just exclude that area, that would give you a boundary line.
That's what we attempted to do years ago.
Right, exactly.
We draw a straight line,
A straight one, yeah, I know.
instead of following the shore.
Right.
At some point, can I have you draw on and then send me a map?
No, I mean, it's simple, just look at your map up here, go to Cape Henry Lateral Point, and go right to the point of Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. I mean, yeah, I can.
Go to, for example, the 1 mile marker.
Yeah, 1 mile marker wherever, and just leave that open all year round and close the rest of it, as far as I'm
Or the
concerned.
small boat channel would be another good marker.
But of course,
That's actually not giving up a lot in compared to the rest of the bay, like say take Reedville or down to Windmill Point and even further than that. They can work a mile and a half or more off of the shore during the sanctuary time. Is there a lot of crabbers down y'all's way?
I wouldn't even call us crabbers, to be honest with you. I mean, you got a bunch of skiffs running around. When Pete, when you crabbed down there and everybody else, it was what, 16, 18 boats that crabbed?
What's that?
How many people crabbed back in the 80s out of Lynn Haven? 70s? Probably 16 or 18.
Yeah, I don't even know if there were that many. Big boats, there were probably only 8.
8, and then there was a bunch of skiffs.
Right.
Now there's 3, and we're all half rigged. We don't fish any amount of. I can tell you that we go in the river and we're catching a bunch of sooks about that big. Can't sell them, and we're sitting there twiddling our thumbs, not making a dime.
I'm just sitting here thinking how many years that we crabbed in that green area. I never heard a peep out of anybody.
And that right there was just thrown away the
I
green.
mean, until Rick Robbins had the thing closed, the last 2 that crabbed down there were Fort Locks.
Yeah. Kevin and
But
Tom.
it was Billy and Ronnie and myself, Paul Herrick,
Yeah.
Kenny Etheridge. The Gideon would come down there in the spring and crab all the way to the old Still Pier, which is right near Rudy Emory. Biggest problem we ever had down there was having to go down there and fight the garbage men for getting your pots off the beach after the storm. Yeah, the trash truck.
So anyway, I can draw you a map. I mean, would the commission be interested in trying to go to the General Assembly to change a line to adjust the sanctuary to where it mirrors the rest of the bay?
We can't.
Wait,
I don't know.
We can't say we can put it on the list.
We can put it on the list like you
Yeah.
Put it on the list, but
and then Ron, would you be apt to that? Something,
I have to.
look at it.
So, would it be more reasonable for somebody to get their delegate or senator to submit regular? So the commission has to go politically get permission to submit something to get it
Oh, okay.
considered. You just have to convince
A
a delegate or a senator to
Look at
submit
it.
something, and then lobby at the same time in advance, Rom and staff and whoever on the commission to support that piece of regulation, where you're getting it introduced and not the commission. I don't know what the
Pretty much, we have to put any legislative actions we want to consider in August. And they go through the whole process, and some of them may be okay, some of them may not be. But it goes through an internal process of review. But you're right, I mean, all you need to do is get a delegate to move something forward.
Talk to them and have them talk to y'all.
Yeah. It's,
You talk to them and have something in your mind that you think is a reasonable piece of legislation to submit. And I'm sure that staff can look at that and go, yeah, that's reasonable, but I can't do that. And they can tell you something is reasonable. Ron can look at it in advance and probably, and not have to get permission from his bosses up the chain to say it's okay. And then you submit it, or you just submit it and then just see what happens.
We do have one piece of unfinished business. Motion to approve the minutes from the March 27th meeting.
Is that a motion? I second it.
Yes, sir.
Well,
The other thing is, what are we gonna do about that Sunday setting and baiting pots? We have to vote on that,
Motion to,
Yeah.
So you put your original recommendations for what staff is gonna do?
I've never seen people that submit and they tell you you can do something.
you could put pots out, you could bait them on Sunday, but you couldn't fish them.
am I wrong? It's not in regulation that you cannot set pots on Sunday.
Correct. We are not undoing anything or changing anything, we are just clarifying.
So we don't need to vote on that.
That's not a regular.
Well, we used to do that in that green area. We baited on Sunday because you couldn't bait on Saturday and have live crabs on Monday.
Oh, that's that goes.
So we went down and baited on Sunday.
There's so many grabs in the pot?
Yeah.
Do we have to just make a recommendation for that or a motion?
you can just say you endorse it.
I think we can just say we agree with that.
Well, that was staff's recommendation. Staff recommendation is you can put your pots out, bait them, but you
Yes, sir.
can't fish them.
I'm good with that.
So, yeah.
So the committee recommends clarifying that pots may be baited or set on Sundays?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And trust me, if staff recommend that, that's gonna happen. Now,
Not always.
according to the other business here, it said, Mr. Cox wants to discuss coal rings at the next meeting.
That's the next work session meeting, which will happen later this year.
Well, no, Mr. Sanford wants to discuss crab sanctuary off Virginia Beach. Sits already there. We just got through doing that. Now it's Mr. Cox's turn to discuss coal rings at the next meeting. Sits already there.
Mr. Cox, I explained the situation that we're in right now with personnel and our staff.
Right.
And I hope that you would respect that and put that off until the proper time. I understand you want to talk about it, but, you know, Joe Grist has been running the workshops for us on these things. And so, if you want to discuss it, we can, but the
You
work
got,
group,
you're filled up. Yeah, okay.
the work group is where those things are going to be done.
I understand.
They have to be discussed there. And in respect for Joe, you know, I think that's, you know, if you want to discuss it, we can, but
No, we'll work to the work group.
that,
All right, so we're gonna approve the minutes, we skipped over that apparently.
Yeah, we had a motion and a second.
Okay. So all in favor of the minutes for the March 27th meeting?
Aye.
All right. That's a unanimous. Any other
Next section
business,
be
Alexa, that,
public comment, if there's
yes,
any.
public comment, thank you for that. Anyone in the audience who would like to make a statement or ask a question? All right,
In that case, the next item would be adjournment.
all right. Motion to adjourn, yes, sir.
And if anyone needs travel reimbursement forms, Brooke has them, or you can email me and I can send them to you.
After July 5th, I can go work at 3 a.m.
If it gets approved by the commission.
Then you'll have it.
Background you have with the letters you have, they're plain text and not bold. You can't hardly read it sitting at the.
Okay, so noted.
I like white background or a yellowish Oh, no, when I do presentations like.